Yuram. Welcome to the good life of incarnated human beings. And let there be light. Above, below, and around, within and without. Okay, we're going to deal with the third sign. The third sign in the zodiac, the third sign of the year, is that of Gemini. The third phase of the cycle, which is ruled by Mercury. This period, therefore, is a period of a certain quality of mental activity. Not that this time is a time to think necessarily, but as the Gemini sign describes, it is the sign of twins. Twins implying two as a version of one. So it's one sign of twins, which implies the sign of two selves, recognizing the two selves, the inner self, the outer self, the higher self, the lower self, the subjective self, the greater self, the free self. For the most part, the Gemini vibration is a vibration during which deep consideration of what duality is about and what opposites are about. For all opposites must be seen as they are, two sides of one thing. Gemini is a time for consideration, philosophic inquiry to some degree, for some. It is a time for analyzing. It is a time for exercising the intellect. It is a time for indulging or exploiting the concrete mind. It is a time to consider what knowledge is about from the point of view of knowing. So here we have the idea of Gemini, the twins. 1 + 1 = 1. Not 2, for the 2 must be seen as 1. Two sides of one being. The left side, the right side. The front side, the back side. The top side and below. And in understanding the two, in knowing the 1 plus the 1, or the 2, enables what freedom is about to occur relative to either one of the two. So if we look at it in terms of purifying the buddhi is about, then you have the negative and the positive, that is 1 + 1, or what appears to be 2. And you have them as one in terms of duality. They form a duality, just as the male and female ideas or concepts also form a duality. Gemini is therefore the time when the two can be seen as one and understood accordingly. They are the same thing. when they are understood to be the same thing, different appearances of the same thing, then they can be transcended. So therefore you have the 1 plus 1 equals only 1. So it is a time to look at duality as it applies to the experience of attraction and repulsion, what you're attracted to, what you were repelled from or repelled by. So it's time to understand causes and effects, action and reaction, processes. It is a time to see the duality of what appears to be the individual personality in distinction from the universal impersonality of consciousness. It is a time to consider what the opposite energies are that each being is born into. So if you are an Aries, it's a good time to consider your oneness relative to the Libran vibration. And if you are a Taurian, it is important to see the sameness, the oneness of the Scorpion vibration, which is also occurring coincident with whatever the sun sign is. The opposite sign is very much alive in that. It's the implied, already existing opposite. Okay. The same with the Gemini. The Sagittarian vibration is brought into immediate focus, recognition, consideration, as that is its opposite. Gemini, Sagittarius, Cancer, Capricorn, Leo, Aquarius, Virgo, Pisces, and so on. So there's a time to not only recognize what the opposites are about, not only to recognize what duality implies, but to see that there is a oneness implied. 1 plus 1 equals 1. For instance, one born during the sign of Cancer needs to accomplish on a physical level, in terms of incarnate experience, family mastery. And the Capricorn energy implies spiritual attainments, because the sun sign is in Cancer. And conversely, for one who is born in the sign of Capricorn, their incarnate experience is oriented or motivated towards social, professional, public attainments. And at the same time, because the Cancer vibration, the opposite is implied simultaneously, the Capricorn must attain the spiritual level of family, consciousness, and or mastery. And is the same for all the signs. Where your sun is, you have incarnate experience. What the opposite sign is implied spiritual mastery, in order to balance oneself out. If you're Taurus, then you got to master sexuality and all the rest of that. If you're Scorpio, then you have to master making money and holding on to things and being relatively secure with materialism. You have to master your desire to hold on to things. So Mercury, which rules Gemini, for ordinary individuals is related to concrete knowledge, science, communication, knowing about things. And versatility is very important. Speech is important. Language is important. Expression on the level of fundamental communication is important. Connections is an important aspect of this particular phase. Spreading out, moving out. Considering the whole from the abstract level of connections, interconnectedness, interrelatedness. So Gemini is fundamentally one of the signs, one of the most important signs of connections or relationships, correspondences. This relative to that, that relative to this. Again, duality. Seeing 1 plus 1 equals 1, rather than just 1 plus 1 equals 2. The higher Gemini in vibration relates to wisdom. Which in its highest sense is related to love. Wisdom expresses knowledge relative to oneness and wholeness, and love is based upon unity, harmony, wholeness, and oneness. The Gemini in vibration relative to Mercury, which rules the mind, or traditionally corresponds to the mind, the conscious self, is the mediator between the lower and the higher self. So this is a time to consciously mediate what is higher from the lower, make distinctions relative to lower, higher consciousness. Get into it with enjoyment and relish. Exercise the mind relative to what it is in terms of a limitation, a function of analyzing consciousness or phenomena, and then go beyond that into exercising what Mercury is relative to intuition, insight, and or the realization of what wisdom is about. For the ordinary person, Mercury functions as concrete mentation, concrete mind. For the developing person or the initiate, so to speak, the accepted seeker, the student of the way, then Mercury functions as a key to understanding what illumination is about, or what the illumined mind is. Where one has their Mercury indicates what one sees. However, in relationship to the opposite sign. Where Mercury is, one might say, the individual is to think upon mastering those things. Master implies having control over that area, and relative to the disciple, person making spiritual progress, mastering implies transcending the notion of 1 plus 1 equals 2 completely. And then 1 plus 1 equals only 1. This is a time, the Gemini phase, that is a time where circulation of consciousness, circulation of breathing is very important. Gemini is a time of connections, implies not only connections from a mental viewpoint, but connections relative to the various vehicles in consciousness. Consciously connect the physical body to the emotional body, to the mental body to the spiritual body. Say 1 plus 1 equals 1. For the ordinary man, Mercury rules the heart. For the disciple, Mercury corresponds to consciousness. So in brief summary, the time of Gemini is a time to realize the fluidity of the mind in terms of what it can know, flexibility, adaptability, not getting stuck in any particular knowledge, not allowing prevention of consciousness to occur on the mental level. And in addition, the recognition of what duality is as a viewpoint, as a way of understanding opposition, but not as an end in itself, but as a means to understand that whatever is in opposition, or one thing relative to another, is in fact complementary, and therefore 1 plus 1 equals 1 again. And this ultimately for the purpose, especially in the case of the disciple or the advanced individual, to be able to gain control over consciousness, to be one with it, to experience enlightenment. That means light, not only relative to thought, but beyond it. You know.